Hello, everybody. Hey, George Latham with you to talk about one of the things people are mystified by in the early stages of marriage after the honeymoon period, when things start to sort of unravel, if you will. Everybody was getting along fine. There was no arguments. It was heaven. And all of a sudden, it's hell. And people are arguing and disagreeing on everything, little things, big things, everything. And it's just a constant struggle, and there's stress, and people are saying, what have I done? I married the wrong person. But this is the same person that they were just in love with, months ago. So people wonder, how is this? What is this? What's behind this? And the truth is, most couples don't really understand what's going on exactly. There's communication problems at this time. You'll have, what the men call just bitching by the women, and the women say the men are just being jerks. But the wife might start to be more concerned about the husband doing his part around the house, clothes lying on the floor, that type of thing, and she never worried about that before. So he's starting to hear that, and he's saying she's the B word, and it escalates from there. So that's just an example, but there's all sorts of little things that start to become an issue that never were before. And this was explained to me by Dr. Frank Pittman years ago when I asked him, what is that? What's behind that? And when people all of a sudden start having these problems with each other that they didn't before, and he said that he calls it the struggle for equality. So what that means is, before the marriage, the woman was kind of okay with more of the role playing and kind of going along with things, and of course people put their best foot forward, and so there may be something to people being more relaxed with their behaviors after they're married, usually on the men's side. And then on the women's side, she might be maybe a little bit more demanding that maybe she wasn't so much before. So there's a little bit of a different role for her as a wife than as a girlfriend. In any event, they're arguing about these things, and there's all sorts of real tragedy taking place where you have couples divorcing so early after marriage because these things are misunderstood, and homes are broken up, and sometimes they have children, and they're left with a single parent situation, and it's because the couple didn't know how to work through this stage of marriage. And there's people that have different names for this stage, but we'll call it the adjustment period, where you have to try to understand what the other person's saying, even though they're not saying it. So she's saying, you're not doing your part. You need to clean up after yourself. You need to help me take care of these kids. You need to do this and that. And you didn't hear this before. And the man's like, he's not the king of his castle anymore. So you have all this going on, and then people don't really communicate well about it. So it just turns into, well, she's just turned into this and he's turned into that, and we just clearly can't make this marriage work. And that's the end of it. But it doesn't need to be the end of it. It needs to be examined, understood, and also people don't know what's on the other side of this. So, all that acceptance that you had before you were married, and then you go through the adjustment period where you're trying to get the other one to do more of what you want them to do after you're married. The demands go up, you expect more, your expectations change, and there's a very, very demanding period that comes along after the honeymoon period, where you want these people to, all the differences aren't so cute anymore. You really want them to do things the way you want done, and you're hell bent on it. And it's a stage that I've heard someone else call that you need to change stage. So, but there's another stage after that people need to know about, and it's called I know you're not going to change, and it's okay stage. So the acceptance comes again later, after we've worked through this struggle. And there does need to be some compromising where, there clearly does have to be some behaviors that might have to change, but not a lot is going to change, and that's what people need to know. And this is the same person that you married, and they're just things that you now want to change, but these things were there all along. So it's a little unfair on one hand to say, well, now that we're married, you need to do more. But it's also sometimes fair that people do need to do more. You have more responsibilities, especially with kids and taking care of a home together. And so there are new demands, but they need to be discussed calmly and respectfully, and not just all of a sudden, I can't stand the way he or she is doing this, and I'm gonna not have it anymore. So it's a kind of a delicate situation when you're trying to tell people that you don't accept this about them anymore. And a lot of this, they're not going to change very much. Some things they might. Maybe he'll be happy to change the diapers when he never planned on that, and maybe he'll start picking up his clothes, and that'd be great if he did. And it'd be great if these things need to be done. A lot of this stuff is reasonable expectations, so why wouldn't people just do it? But we don't all do exactly what we're supposed to do all the time. So there needs to be an understanding that this is the way they are. There might be some things that can change. Communication has to be respectful, and we have to understand that we're not always doing what the other person wants us to do either, and things that we should be doing. So the focus needs to not always be on the other person. But the big story here is that this demanding stage comes after the romance wears off, and then all of a sudden you're being asked to do things you didn't expect to have to do, and that's just normal. And you're not going to have to turn into another person, and they're saying that they don't love you anymore and things like this, but they're just not understanding the whole journey and what comes next. So what does come next for people who are married and stay married, they can all attest to this, is that stage where you're having these disagreements and arguing about everything, and you want the other person to change and fit into what you think they should be. That passes, and there'll be some adjustments, but for the most part, people aren't not going to change a lot, and eventually you come to accept that. So in all the healthy marriages I've seen, all the couples report the same thing. Early on, they squabbled about a lot of things, little things, big things, and they worked through some things and they compromised on some things, but a lot of things they just had to accept. And that's the part that I really am talking about today. So a lot of these things, you just have to understand it. You think you can't live with this or live like this, or with him doing these things or her doing these things, but there's a lot of these that you can't accept, and you will have to accept, no matter who you're married to. Nobody's going to fit into a mold for you, especially when you're talking about a lot of changes that they didn't bargain for. So and so we have to understand that there's going to be some adjustment, and part of that is, it sounds crazy, but you're just going to have to accept them the way they are, and that comes easier than you think. When you're stuck in that stage where you want them to change, it's hard to imagine that, okay, well, one day I'm just going to accept this. And you're telling yourself that you can't accept it, and you're not going to. And I'm not talking about running around cheating on each other or anything like that, but certain things that you used to think were okay about your partner. And so now you're going to have to get to that point where it's okay again. And that's where marriages do get in time, but you have to give it that time. So within 6 months after you're married to maybe 2 years after you're married, you're going to fall out of the romance stage. You're going to fall into this they better change or it's over stage. And then after that, you get to the acceptance stage where you say, okay, that's just the way they are, and I love them anyway. And then you can move toward being truly best friends, liking each other and loving each other in a deeper way, knowing that you've survived these stages and stayed together and didn't run when things were difficult. And so I want people to know that there's always that to look forward to. It will come. As I've said before, it's sort of like if you thought that your adolescent child was going to be stuck in an adolescent stage forever, would you have ever had children? Of course not. But you know that they grow out of it. And marriages grow out of this early stage where you can't stand each other and you think you've made a mistake and they need to change or else. And it passes and you come to accept them, and eventually they'll actually want to do more. But during that time when you're demanding that they change, people don't change very much at all. So it's when they want to, not because they have to, that people will change. And that comes also during the acceptance phase and just part of getting older and being more mature and more responsible and more caring about others. So stick it out. Don't panic. Read about these things. Check out my website at georgelathamllc.com or my Facebook page, Make Marriage Last. And stay tuned, and we'll be back with more tips for those of you in the married life. And thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.